and also for everybody who joined us last night at the vigil service. I know it means a lot to all of us, and it certainly means a lot in the memory of Marianne. A couple weeks before she died, she was really wanting to make sure I expressed to everyone her deep thanks for all of the acts of kindness, all of the prayers, all of the good wishes, everything that everyone had done for her during her illness. So I really want to extend those thanks to all of you. I also want to take a minute on behalf of my family to thank all of the doctors, nurses, and technicians at Kaiser who took care of her over the last year and a half, and most especially to Kaiser Hospice. I think those were angels who came and helped us with Marianne in those last days, and we are forever grateful to them. I also again want to thank my brother Anthony for being her constant caretaker over the past year and a half. On behalf of all of us, we can't thank you enough. And finally, I do want to thank Father Robert for all of your kindness and your spiritual care for Marianne and for our whole family. So thank you very much. I just want to say a few words about Marianne, or maybe it's about me, I'm not sure. But most of you know Marianne was excellent with children, having taught the youngest students at St. Peter Martyr for almost 40 years. And while I know it's a human tendency to want to take credit for other people's accomplishments, I have to say in this particular case, if Marianne was great with children, you really might have me to thank for that. And that's because Marianne had the task of sharing a room with me, her baby sister, all through her childhood and teen years, starting at the age of 6 years old. And not only was I 4 years younger than Marianne, but I was also an extremely anxious kid, prone to nightmares, afraid of the dark, afraid of closets left open at night. I remember making her get up a number of times in the middle of the night to close the closet door, just in case something was going to come out. A kid who was constantly having trouble falling asleep, or who would wake up frightened in the middle of the night. So Marianne, if she wanted to sleep, had to get really good at calming me down, often telling me stories, finding ways to make me laugh, or reading me book after book until I relaxed and grew tired again. I was talking to Marianne just 3 weeks ago about a book that I must have asked her to read 1,000 times. Let's see, it's Mr. Willoughby's Christmas Tree. I didn't just ask her at Christmas time either. I asked her to read this book all year long. She remembered it, and she said, in fact, she still had her original copy on her shelves at the St. Peter Martyr classroom she occupied for 39 years. So Joe and I went in last week, and we found it on her shelf, and it's still got her inscription from, I think, when we were just kids on the front. This book may seem kind of plain and boring to you, but it was a favorite of mine, in part because it's about bunnies, or it has bunnies in it, and you know I love bunnies. But also, I love this book because it reminds me so much of my sister. I realize this story has resonated with me, not just because she read it to me so many times, but because in many ways, it reflects the kind of person Marianne was. Mr. Willoughby's is the story of a Christmas tree that is so big and so amazing that Mr. Willoughby can't fit the entire tree in his mansion. So he has to cut the top off to make it fit. That tree top then is given to his upstairs maid, because again, Mr. Willoughby is a rich dude. He gives the top to the upstairs maid, but she can't even fit that top into her room. So she has to cut the top off again, and she puts it out, and someone finds it, and once again they have to cut the top off to make it fit in their place, and so on, until Mr. Willoughby's Christmas tree has provided the perfect tree for not just a bunch of families of people, but for a family of bears, a family of foxes, a family of bunnies, and a family of mice who live right there in Mr. Willoughby's house. So this story, as you can tell, is very serious. But if you really think about it, it's a story of abundance. Of a tree that's big enough to be able to give everyone exactly what they need and more. And that's why this story reminds me so much of Marianne. She, like the tree, had an amazing amount to give. And she did. In her case, it was an abundance of patience, an abundance of kindness, and an abundance of care. Over the course of nearly 4 decades, she gave that same patient, playful sense of humor and steadiness she gave to her anxious little sister to the literally hundreds of kids who came into her classroom. And she was amazing with them. A few months ago, while I was visiting her pre-K class at St. Peter's, Mary told me she was going to work with a boy in the class who was having trouble writing his letters because, in part, he had trouble focusing. So while I tried to spend some time with a couple of kids putting puzzles together, which was hard enough for me because I am not the patient one in the family, I watched her as she worked with this boy, taking his hand in hers, putting his pencil on the piece of paper, and telling her, draw a line from here to here. No focus here. Draw a line from here to here, very patiently pointing it out. Slant the letter this way, slant it this way, draw the first line, come on, now over here, pay attention. Over and over and over and over. It was making me crazy just watching it. But she kept doing it. And at the end of this process, success, he'd written a whole line of capital A's on his paper. And that was how she was. She would meet children exactly where they were, see their strengths rather than their difficulties, and work patiently with each one so they could gain mastery, learn, and grow. She did that with each of her students. She did that with our nieces and nephews. And way back when, she did that with me. There's another way, too, that this book reminds me of Marianne. The pieces of the Christmas tree that Mr. Willoughby discarded from his very large Christmas tree may have seemed humble and not showy enough for him in his big mansion. But they turned out to be fantastic and exactly right for the people and the critters who discovered them. Marianne was like those humble pieces of tree. She wasn't grandiose or showy. Her gift lay in her ability to be and do just what was needed, never drawing attention to herself. Happy to do her job, happy to care for those who needed it, happy to provide for those who were the smallest and the most vulnerable. I mentioned earlier that I take a bit of credit for Marianne's accomplishments, but the opposite is also true. That is to say, I credit her with helping me achieve in my own life. And that's because with her quiet, steady, understated way, she made it possible for me, the anxious and constantly fearful one, to stop being so frightened, whether of the dark or an open closet at night, and instead to go try things, to find my confidence, and to take a few chances. And I think that's what's allowed me to accomplish what I have academically, professionally, and personally. I know she's done the same for many, many people through the years. So while we might remember her as humble and quiet, what she did for me and for many whose lives she touched was truly great. Thank you, Marianne, for being your steady, humble self, making it possible for the rest of us to find our very own way to shine. I'd like to now also invite you at the end of this service to come and join my family for some food and drink in the hall, I guess right behind this wall. It's food from the Mecca, so all the Pittsburgh people